Hello, hello, welcome to my latest webinar. I say webinar, I mean live stream. So hopefully this is working. If you'd like to type in the chat, let me know you can hear me, give me some feedback. And of course, type in the chat, let me know where you're watching from, because I always like to know where everyone's viewing from. And hopefully make it as interactive as I possibly can on this Wednesday evening. So with that said, let's just bear with me a second. Sorry about that. Right, I'm back. Here we go. Right, so this is the continuation of the Boeing Starliner Propulsion Anomalies investigation report review through the lens of STAMP, STPA and CAST. And this is part of a series. I think this is live stream number 13 now, so we're getting on. There's quite a few of these. We're not quite halfway through the report yet, but we are getting there. But today we're going to continue from where we left off yesterday, and let's just bring that up on screen. There we go. So we got to yesterday, the end of section 4.7.1, observations and recommendations, and we're going to continue with section 4.8 today. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is mark off on the table of contents where we've actually got to. So we've done everything up until 4.7. I think that's where we got to, isn't it? Yes, it is. So yeah, so we're now on section 4.8, common observations and organisational factors. That goes on to section 5, which is page 115. So there's about sort of 13 pages there, and we should be able to get through that today, hopefully tonight. So about an hour, 90 minutes. And of course, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, commiserations, compliments, please type them in the chat. Let me know what you think, and we'll get stuck in. Get a bit more light on the screen. There we go. You can see me better. So section 4.8 then. Common observations and organisational factors. So each analysis section above looks specifically at investigating the proximate direct cause of an individual undesirable event. So proximate direct cause of an individual undesirable event. This allows this analysis of each undesirable event also looks at the event's specific intermediate causes that led to the proximate or direct cause. This section will explore intermediate causes, observations, and organisational factors that are common across the anomalies under investigation. Fantastic. So section 4.8.1 is about testing. There are some organisational factors. There is some recommendations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal my boxes and black lines from over there so I can better break the report up and understand and consume what's in it. So let's just do that quickly. Bring that all to the front. That's not what I wanted. That is what I wanted there, look. Excuse me. There we go. Organisational factor 8. Recommendation, organisational factor 9, and then there's a recommendation, where is it? Just there, number 13. Nope. Recommendation 14, recommendation 15, recommendation 16. And then we'll keep going later on, depending on how far we go and how fast. Okay, so testing. Observation number 1, execution of flight test objectives and acquisition of flight data. So if we get our little jigsaw puzzle piece that I keep talking about, it should be embedded in your brain by now, the number of hours I've been doing this and talking about it. So this should be embedded in your brain. So when we're talking about, yeah, there we go. So observation number 1, execution of flight test objectives and acquisition of flight data. So if we just have a think about that statement through the lens of the control loop, the jigsaw piece, somebody or something is executing, so providing control actions, and they are essentially attempting to execute flight test objectives. So this controller, whoever that is, the flight test organization, they are making decisions about what objectives to put into the program, and then also which objectives to actually execute. And of course, they need some feedback about the flight test itself in the form of some data to ensure proper evaluation of those test flights. But before they go and do the testing, there should be logically some effort, some decisions made, maybe following some procedures or some kind of method for defining flight test objectives. And that activity to define those objectives should have, would have included consideration of how they acquire flight data, and essentially define what this feedback path is. So what sensors they have, what recording devices, how much data, at what rate and resolution, all of that good stuff. And that should hopefully provide the flight test organization adequate feedback to be able to assure that they've met flight test objectives. And of course, if they don't meet flight test objectives, what actually is the state of the situation? Because they need qualification data, they need test data, and of course they need to make sure they design that appropriately. Now, in this case, it mentioned Boeing and NASA launched OFT-1. Is it operational flight test? Orbital flight test, that was it. Orbital flight test number 1, number 2, and the crewed flight test without the ability to store and retain data to ensure proper evaluation of test flights. Which I'm sure you're already thinking, well, hang on a minute. Why would you spend all that time, treasure, blood, sweat, toil, and tears to do some launches if you're not actually going to store and retain the data to ensure proper evaluation of test flights? That seemed like a bit of a strange statement to make. So let's look into that. Let's understand what is going on. What does that statement actually mean? What's involved? Okay, so FTOs. FTO, everyone. What's an FTO? FTO is not a Japanese car from the early 90s. FTO, flight test objectives, I'm presuming. Yeah, there it is, look. Flight test objectives. Can you see that on the screen? Let me zoom in. There you go. Flight test objectives, FTOs. So let's use our little grey boxes for text, because that was helpful before. There we go, that one. Let's put it over here. So I can remember, so I don't have to keep trying to remember over and over again. Right, there we go. So I'll delete that, paste it in there. Flight test objectives, stretch it out a bit. There we go, flight test objectives. Flight test objectives that were considered to only be partially met from previous flights, such as VFTO 737, during the orbit and operations and rendezvous, proximity operations and docking departure and deorbit mission phases, obtain blankety blankety blank, and FTO 1092 during the undocking mission phase, obtain blankety blankety blank, without which will cause uncertainties in the certification of the vehicle. So these two flight objectives are clearly really important to the program. That's the main objective here, is to be able to certify the vehicle. So without those two flight test objectives being achieved, then there's no point to the program. It's basically what we all doing here. All post-flight data reports. Post-flight data reports remark on the inability to obtain mission representative data during key portions of the mission and include recommendations to remedy this change, but has not been pursued. Surely this would be like on the main dashboard, the risk dashboard for the entire program. If you're not doing this, then what the heck is going on? I'm stating the obvious there, so let's keep going. The low sample rate contributed to misdiagnosis of thruster failures on OFT-1 and OFT-2. So again, if this is the conduct of the flight test and the spacecraft operations, and this is our ground control, our project organization, they need adequate timely feedback about the spacecraft and its performance and behavior, so they could make safety critical decisions in a timely fashion. And if that data is not available to them, then the control structure is very, very inadequate in controlling those hazards and those risks. So why was that? Why would it make sense to launch without the ability to obtain mission representative data and then not pursue it? And then, of course, why would it make sense to have a low sample rate, that contributes to misdiagnosis of the thruster failures? What's going on? Why would it make sense that that's happened? That misdiagnosis allowed the launch of CFT. So this is really bad. And the repeat of the thruster failures. The service module reaction control system qualification gaps were discussed prior to OFT. So they were discussed. Fantastic. The forward work identified during the PCB meeting 19383. So is that 2019, is it? Presumably. Requested OFT flight data to validate models and engine performance for lack of mission representative operational duty cycles for OMAC RCS engines, flight performance evaluation. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a basic requirement you'd expect to be fulfilled. This shows NASA planned to close the identified lack of qual data by using flight data, test data from OFT. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, makes sense. The deficiency in the decision to use OFT1 and later OFT2 to gather service module reaction control system qualification test data to cover the gaps prior to crewed flight was not the concept, but the execution. Sorry, the deficiency in the decision to use those to gather qualified test data to cover the gaps prior to crew was not the concept, but the execution. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's either been a long day or I'm a bit slow today. Does that make sense to you, that sentence? The deficiency in the decision to use OFT1 and OFT2 to gather data to cover the gaps prior to crewed flight was not the concept, but the execution. OFT1 and OFT2 did not have the RCS okay. So those flights were not equipped to be able to do the sample rate sufficient to capture development quality data on the thrusters to support closing the test gaps and proceeding to crewed flight on CFT. Okay, so did they know that? Did they recognize that? If they did, what were they even doing? Going for a crewed flight test if they'd not already qualified that stuff? That's really, really not good. Doesn't sound good at all, that. Anyway, to support the closing the test gaps and proceeding to crewed flight on crewed flight test. Additionally, the sample rate for recorded data from the flight was insufficient. So this bit is about chamber pressure sample rates, and this is the recorded data from the. So is this the broad? So all sample data for recorded sample rate. I can't speak today. For all the recorded data, the sample rate was inadequate. And in this case, it was specific to the service module reaction control system chamber pressure. Okay, to determine what duty cycle the thrusters were commanded. Okay, so there's missing feedback or inadequate feedback there. So if this is our spacecraft control system ground control, and this is the provision of the thrust, and everything to do with control of thrust, provision of thrust, and then this is the behavior of the spacecraft at the bottom. Change in trajectory, all of that good stuff. If the feedback path for data is inadequate, not only is it potentially inadequate for the controller itself, but also for everyone else who needs that data. And that is clearly, that's clearly not acceptable in principle. So why was it accepted? Was it accepted knowingly? Let's have a look. Let's find out if we can. Thruster duty cycle is likely a contributor to either mechanical issues with the thruster or the thermal soak back temperatures observed at the valve. This contributes to the difficulty in reconstructing the thruster failures observed on OFT-1, 2 and crude flight test. Okay, so that's observation 1, execution of flight test objectives and acquisition of flight data. So that's quite a, I wasn't sort of expecting that kind of that kind of observation. That's quite damning. That is quite damning. That I can't imagine at the moment why it would make sense to continue with that. That seems quite strange. But let's keep going, you know. Organizational factor number 8. Insufficient verification of validation. Boeing submitted and NASA subsequently accepted insufficient verification, validation test data and flight rationale for the command module RCS and the service module RCS for the CFT mission. Starliner service module RCS was not backed by sufficient ground testing. Wow. Excuse me, was not backed by sufficient ground testing, in-flight testing, and test like you fly methodology. Excuse me, I think I'm coming down with something. Prior to flight test number 1, ERB 18 and PCB 19 identified that the SMRCS did not meet the standard for human-rated engine qualification, which includes flight representative mission duty cycle testing, including worst-case thermal soak-back ratcheting and successful restart. So that is the test like you fly methodology that's mentioned there, look. Okay, so they knew about it. The attendees and organizations involved in the ERB and the PCB, they knew that that was the case. Okay, so their mental model is, we know that there's a deficiency. So why would they give the authorization to continue? Did they give the authorization to continue to the rest of the program? These are the questions I'd expect the investigation to go and look at. And maybe we'll find out in the next few pages. The forward plan to accept the risk prior to the CFT. So, forward plan. There we go, everyone. Forward action plan. Yay, FAPS. Forward plan to accept the risk prior to CFT was to obtain OFT-1 flight representative operational data of the OMAC and RCS engines, performance and induced thermal within the limitations of the plan data from the OFT-1 existing configuration in order to correlate the basis for acceptable engine performance under nominal mission conditions. Once OMAC RCS engine performance and thermal conditions are validated for actual flight conditions, environments, operations, representative usage conditions in OFT-1, residual risk for crude flight application will be mitigated and the issue can be closed. Okay, but that sounds like that didn't happen. That's what they intended, but that's not what happened. So this is, where is it? So this is, so accept the risk prior to CFT, but it's to obtain flight representative operational data within the limitations of the plan data from OFT-1. So there may have been a delta between what they need from to make it flight representative versus what the spacecraft is outfitted with flight test instrumentation or whatever to be able to achieve that. So I imagine there'll have been hopefully a consideration of that if there's a delta, and then an explanation as to why that's okay. And maybe the justification would be, well, we can do this on OFT-1, that gives us a warm feeling, and then the gaps, the delta, we can then fill in with OFT-2, presumably. I'm just anticipating they're the kind of things that are going to come out. Let's keep going. So the plan to use OFT-1 flight data to complete qualification testing could make sense. The NASA team discussed this in ERB 180045, which is that one, same one. They weighed the risk to the ISS of the uncrewed OFT-1 mission. Oh, this is not sounding too good. They weighed the risk to the ISS of the uncrewed OFT-1 mission without fully qualified SMRCS thrusters. It was rationalised and accepted that the orbits of OFT-1 would make below the ISS before rendezvous, and dock on flight day 2 would provide sufficient data about the performance of the SMRCS in a representative environment prior to rendezvous with the ISS. I've not been funny, but that sounds super risky. That sounds like really, really risky. I'm actually gobsmacked by that. That is quite risky. Because you've essentially got a test vehicle that's not qualified operating right next to a really, really, really valuable asset that has human beings on board. The level of risk, the magnitude of severity of smashing into the space station with an unqualified test vehicle. Wow. I mean, from a let's get our little jigsaw piece up here for a minute. So let's have a think. So if this is the Starliner program management making decisions about how they're going to do the flight test program, and they're weighing the risk to the ISS of an uncrewed OFT-1 mission without a fully qualified SMRCS thrusters, I'd like to think that whoever or whatever that organisation is has got stakeholders from the ISS team who are responsible for operational safety. And those stakeholders would be like, nah, mate, you're not bringing that thing near our space station. Not this time. Maybe next time when we've got assurance that you've actually done a good job and everything's fine. But no, that's not coming near our space station again. And I'm kind of, with the benefit of hindsight, they've had 3 flight tests. One of those is a crew flight test. I'm surprised the ISF safety management team are not like, no, stay away. Go and do your flight test away from our, infinitely valuable space station, and then show us some good evidence, test evidence, and when we're happy, then we'll allow you to come to our space station. But that's just me. I'm very, very cynical in this respect, because this, what we've discovered so far does not give me a warm feeling with regards to the system safety engineering of the design of that spacecraft. So if the ISS safety management team are watching this, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of your meetings and understand how you can justify this, and whether you have had people screaming and shouting and saying no. I don't know. Anyway, let's keep going. So it was rationalised and accepted that the orbits would make below the ISS before rendezvous and dock on flight day 2 would provide sufficient data about the performance of the SMRCS. So when we say sufficient data, is this to the test organisation, or is this to justify the safety case to the ISS responsible organisation? Because, the burden of proof and sufficiency might be different depending on which stakeholder we're talking about, if that makes sense. Right, so let's keep going. I think I've laboured that point enough, haven't I? Yeah, there we go. So the plan was to use OFT-1 as a developmental SMRCS test, vice conducting further ground test to anchor analysis with the test. I mean, from a program perspective, why would it make sense to waste a flight test when you could conduct further ground tests and solve these problems? When I imagine that we should already be doing the ground test anyway to qualify this stuff. Why do we have to wait until we've got a crewed flight test before we get ground tests sorted out? That's the impression I've got from the previous parts of the report. Anyway, let's keep going. To anchor analysis with test. In a modern commercial spacecraft world where you may find your program hardware poor and or cost constrained, low dollar per kilogram to orbit values may permit such on-orbit testing via complex and expensive simulated environments on the ground. So it's cheap to stick them in space, so we'll just do that. Yeah, we'll do that, everyone. It's cheap to stick them in space, but we're going to put it right next to an invaluable International Space Station that's got people on it. The the control structure for those decisions really needs examining, because that is a bit of a risky way to do things. And in this case, this organisation loses a flight test vehicle, whereas everybody else loses the International Space Station, or worse. The deficiency in this design was not the concept, but the execution. Right, I think what it's saying is the idea, the concept was sound, but the way it was executed was deficient. That's what that seems to say. I think I must be a bit stupid today, because this doesn't quite make sense to me. Maybe it's just the language. It has been a long day. Okay, OFT1 and subsequently OFT2 did not have data login, so they couldn't even do what they said they were going to do anyway. Sampling rates sufficient to capture developmental quality data on the SMRCS thrusters. So why was that? Who made that decision? Why did they make the decision? Why did it make sense to make the decision like that? I mean, some of these decisions sounds like someone must have had a gun put to their head to say you need to keep going, because it doesn't make logical sense as an outsider. But then again, as we keep going through this, we might get to a point where actually it's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense that they would make a decision like that, regardless of how ridiculous it appears on the outset. When you actually understand the context, it might be like, well, yeah, I would make the same decision maybe. I don't know. Anyway, when OFT, operational orbital flight test, service module RCS thrusters were put through non-mission representative profiles due to the mission elapsed time anomaly. I think I'm going to have to look at that mission elapsed time. Should we risk having a go on Google, everybody? Should we risk it? Mission elapsed time anomaly, Starliner. I can't spell anomaly, everybody. There we go. So Boeing orbital flight test. Right, let's just search for MET. Anomalies. A software logic issue with the spacecraft's mission elapsed time clock manifested 31 minutes into the flight. Due to intermittent space-ground communication issues, flight controllers could not correct the issue. This anomaly caused the spacecraft's orbital maneuvering thrusters to burn into an incorrect orbit, causing too much propellant to be burned. What? This precluded a rendezvous and docking with the oh my gosh. This mission was reduced to just 3 days, with the spacecraft successfully landing at White Sands Space Harbour on December 22nd, 2019. After the mission, it was revealed that another critical software bug was found in flight, which could have resulted in the service module bumping back into the Starliner after separation. The bug was fixed 2 hours before the capsule re-entered. Had the bug not been discovered and fixed, it may have damaged Starliner and prevented a safe landing. Additionally, it was determined that had the first anomaly not occurred, the second would not have been detected. Wow. Oh my gosh, wow. This is... wow. I mean, just... just to put a fine point on things, right? Let's get our little jigsaw piece out, everybody. Let's put it on there so you can see it. Okay, so where is it? Anomalies. Okay, so a software logic issue with the spacecraft's mission elapsed time clock. Right, so I don't know the architecture or design of this spacecraft, and I know some generic architecture stuff to do with other things I've looked at in the past. So there will be a computer on board, or multiple computers, and they will each have their own interpretation of what time is, and they're supposed to synchronize that time amongst themselves, especially during critical operations, assuming that the architecture is similar to how other things I've seen in the past. And so that mission elapsed time clock, if they're talking about a specific clock, it will be inside a specific computer performing a specific function, roles and responsibilities. Now, if this is talking about the orbital maneuvering thrusters to burn into an incorrect orbit, the control that is essentially the thrust controller of some description, the thrust control computer, whatever it is. And that computer will have some control algorithms, decision making, a process model or beliefs. And as part of one of those beliefs, it will be about mission elapsed time. And that time will be used to synchronize the decisions that that controller makes about thrust and the control actions it provides. Going back to duration, timing, sequence, all of that other good stuff. Now, of course, if they are burning into an incorrect orbit and they've used too much propellant, then obviously there's some unsafe control actions there, some contributory control actions. So why would it make sense for that controller to do that? And what they're saying here is that's due to anomalies with the mission elapsed time. And I've not read the details, so I don't know the background, but they've said there's some anomalies with it. We don't know what those specific anomalies are. But if you're affecting the beliefs of the controller and it starts doing strange things, we can't be surprised. And so that, given that we know that, just this 30 seconds looking at a control loop, we can start putting integrity requirements on the mission elapsed time source, what that time is and how it's used, and then how it's physically implemented. And then, of course, it mentions here about intermittent space-ground communication issues. So if we have let's have another one of these little control loops that can represent the ground. So let's put that to the back. Oh, no, not quite to the back. There we go. So if we have two of these, because this is the ground control team, this is the onboard computer that's controlling the spacecraft and doing the thrust control actions. If they have a breakage in this ability to provide control actions and receive feedback from the spacecraft due to intermittent space-to-ground communication issues, I'd argue and assume that the design of the spacecraft had already identified intermittent communications as being an issue, so they will have put certain features in the design and architecture of the onboard computer to be able to enact certain actions when not in control or communication with Earth. And now I don't know whether that's the case in this design. I'm assuming that it is, because intermittent issues with space-ground comms shouldn't really affect the safe control of the spacecraft, especially if we're talking about a spacecraft that's going to dock with the International Space Station. So yeah, that's a bit strange. And then to find another software anomaly as well, I mean, there's something not right with the way this has been designed and the way it's been engineered and certified and tested. It really needs a good looking at, I would strongly suggest. And I'd recommend, of course, using Stamp, STPA or CAST. And if you need help with that, if you want to have a conversation, a complimentary free conversation, no obligation to work with me at all, I'm happy to talk with you. Just visit my website, so Whiteley-Safety.co.uk, click on the big green button, I need help now. There you go, just press that button, stick your name, email address, phone number, send me a message. We can set up a call and we can see how I could possibly help. Even if it's just to answer a few questions, to give you some food for thought, happy to do that, happy to help. Because at the end of the day, safety is everybody's, priority, or should be their priority, and I'm here to help and serve. That's what it's all about. I wouldn't sit here for as many hours as I have on live streams if I didn't take it seriously. So please, there is that offer there if you need some help, you just want to have a chat. Okay, so due to the Met anomaly, the logic for proceeding without complete qualification testing was carried from OFT1 to OFT2. So that's quite a significant risky decision that sort of moved it across. And again, that implies that the OFT spacecraft is going to be outfitted with the appropriate, telemetry and data logging architecture and design. Excuse me. Data logging and or telemetry rates were too slow to capture developmental quality test data, so they didn't fix that. Flight data at blankety blank is not a suitable replacement for qualification level questions, according to OFT2 data in hindsight presentation. During an interview with NASA engineering propulsion expert on the Boeing Starliner engine, the expert noted that the low sample rate likely contributed to the misdiagnosis of the year's observed service module RCS failures on OFT1 and OFT2. post-flight test reports written by Boeing. So post-flight test reports. Oh, I'm using the wrong colour, sorry. They should be orange to represent candidates for inclusion in the control structure model if we were needing to do that. The post-flight test reports written by Boeing and delivered to the commercial crew program all call attention to the low sample rate for chamber pressure on the service module RCS system, making it difficult to understand RCS performance and anomalies. Okay, so it sounds like everybody knew that that's an issue. Okay, great. Why would it make sense to keep pushing, moving forwards? The following is pulled from the OFT report. Again, like I moaned yesterday, it'd be nice if that was a reference in a reference list that we could point to. Even if the reference list itself is classified or redacted or held back, it just helps to keep people sort of clear what documents are what, you know, because this is an investigation. We're looking at evidence here. We need to be, as investigators writing up as a report, we need to be as open as we can be and make it as easy as possible for the audience, as frictionless as possible for the audience to understand what we've found and why it makes sense and what the issues are. So please, if you can, in your complex technical reports, use an appendix or a reference list and have a reference number in here so we all know which is which. During the orbit insertion burn, multiple RCS thrusters were used for attitude control and pointing. This thruster usage seen in figure 528-17, which shows the chamber pressure data, RCS manifold pressure, and the RCS valve temperature. This figure is for the thrusters on manifold 1 of the bottom doghouse. Similar data is available for manifold 1 and 2 for all doghouses. All indications are that the RCS thruster operated as expected during this maneuver. The pressure chamber sensor, hang on a minute, PC. Yeah, chamber pressure sensor and command status bit data rates are such that it is not possible to get consistent correlations between the chamber pressure rise and the RCS fire command to assess timing delays. Okay, now that is critical. That is really important. It's like going back to our little jigsaw puzzle piece earlier on. Let's just pull that apart for a minute. So when we're talking about chamber pressure, we're talking about this feedback here, but we're also talking about command status bit data. So there's two of those in fact, let me save myself a bit of time and just stick it in here like this. So we have chamber pressure PC. It's combustion chamber pressure, isn't it? Combustion chamber pressure. And we have the command status bit data. And then of course there's the data rates of that feedback. But that feedback is twofold. One is to establish chamber pressure, which is the control process, but also to understand the command status. You know, what commands has the controller. There we go, thrust command. So what commands has this controller been providing? And then by extension, how has the control process responded to that? And if you don't have that at the sufficient rates, you're not going to be able to understand the behavior and whether it's acceptable or not. And this goes back to these simple diagrams here. You know, if you imagine that, I don't want to get too technical, but let's say this 0 is thrust off, 1 is thrust on. I'm not going to say whether it's variable or not, But if you imagine this is the perfect scenario, as soon as you provide the command thrust on, it immediately achieves the thrust level that you want. The physics of the situation are it's likely, not a curved line, I need a straight line. There we go. Oh, why is it curved? I want a straight line. Oh my gosh, give me straight. There we go, straight line, everybody. There we go. Let's give it a colour. What colour should we have? Should we have a nice? Let's have a pink colour for a change. That'll do. Right. So imagine that there's a ramp. So this time, whatever this is, in tens of seconds, milliseconds, minutes, whatever it is, there'll be a time that it ramps. So if it ramps up as quick as that, that's high, fast response. But if it takes ages and ages, of course, the timing that you're, the measurement sample rate that you've got needs to be adequate enough to be able to detect that slant, that variance. And of course, you've also got it on the way down as well. So if you shut it off at that point, there we go. So if you turn it off at this point here, does the thrust actually stop quickly as you expect, or does it take ages? Is there a delay, a ramp down? Because of course, the more that this is exaggerated like this, the more potential that you're going to have for undesired effects and potential unsafe contributory control actions. And again, it could. That could be just the timing of the command that is provided. But then you've also got the potential for the duration as well. So if the duration is too long or too short, if it's too long, that talks about potentially wasting fuel and things like that. I hope that makes sense. I'm sure it does. If you'd like to give me some abuse in the comments, that would be fantastic. I think actually I've got a comment from somebody. I'll have a look at that in a second. Just bear with me while I get back to where we were. There we go. So let's just put this to one side. So there we go. That'll do, won't it? Excuse me. Right. Yeah. Let's. Excuse me. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. Delete that bit. There we go. There's another jigsaw piece. Right. So with these data rates, many of the RCS pulses are not captured by the data system as they are typically less than 100 milliseconds in duration. There you go. That's the duration there. So if we know this at the outset, we should be specifying the design of the data capture system to be able to deal with that. So the question is, well, why was it not designed that way? Did they know that this was the issue and they built it so they just went with it? Or, why is that? Why is the data capture rate not adequate? What's going on there? Okay, additionally, the OFT test report called for ground testing. That was ultimately never... Oh dear, never conducted. So there's a request to come out, going back to our little jigsaw puzzle. Somebody in the test organisation sent some feedback to program leadership and said, hey, we need to do some ground testing. We need to do some ground testing for this. Please, request, action. Is it a control action or is it feedback? Is it a demand? Is it a request? Is it an action? What is this action? What is this interaction from the test team or whoever it is that wrote the test report and the organisation, the leadership, the entity who is responsible for taking that on and then doing something with it? So did they do that? Did they receive it? Did they anticipate it? Did they make an active decision not to do that for whatever reason? That's what the investigation should be looking at. Okay, so RCS thruster B2R3 is the one thruster that ultimately failed during the mission and documented in the anomaly log. Yay, anomaly logs. We like everyone loves a log. Anomaly log as anomaly 000058. Does that mean there was 57 other ones that we need to think about? During this MET anomaly, seven other RCS thrusters experienced anomalous PC behavior as well. Later in the mission, hang on, so many anomalies, everybody. Anomaly 7, anomalous PC behavior. Excuse me, right. Later in the mission, Boeing was able to confirm proper I've chosen, yeah, let me make that purple as well while I'm at it. I know this seems like a bit of a enthusiastic thing to do, put all these highlights and things on, but the reason I do this is because it helps me to practice developing my muscles in my brain, my control algorithms, my decision making, on trying to review information and critically think about it through the lens of this control loop. So, is this test report, is the content of this report, could it be can it be interpreted as the content of that report maybe capturing some feedback that needs to go somewhere else, or maybe it's some assumptions that need to be tracked, it's got some actions in it, maybe it's got some safety critical information that has to be communicated. So is the thing itself, the entity itself, do I want to treat it as a type of controller notionally, or do I want to treat it as a vehicle, sorry, not a vehicle, a vessel for important information? And then what is the information? What context is it? Is it important? Does it influence decisions? Does it, maybe it updates some assumptions? So the reason I'm doing this is just so I can practice, lift some weights with my brain, do the reps to build those muscles and that mental agility. Anyway, later in the mission, Boeing was able to confirm proper operation of the 7 thrusters, even while the PC readings were inconsistent, and re-enabled these thrusters for use in orbit and disposal. As part of the root cause analysis and corrective action activity for the failed thruster B2R3 and the anomalous PC sensors, so these are PC sensors and thrusters, so actuators and sensors, Boeing is planning to perform ground testing of 2 flight RCS thrusters with the duty cycle shown in figure 2.8, to characterize the thruster thermal environment to aid in the failure analysis. Bolding added for emphasis. Oh, right, okay, so for the RCCA that's reported in this report that is ongoing, I understand, Boeing is planning to perform ground testing. So they may have already done that. There might be people watching this that are involved in that activity and know everything about it, so fantastic. So that's great. It's a bit late, but it's great that it's planned to be done. A discussion with NASA engineering propulsion expert on Starliner, Boeing Starliner SMRCS revealed this this test was never conducted. The expert said there was not ground hot fire testing of an RCS jet. Right, shall I put that out of the way? I'll just put it out of the way, it'll be fine. Let's just put it out of the way. I'll put it back in a minute, I promise. There we go, right, so there was not ground hot fire testing of an RCS jet between roughly December 2019, final ATP acceptance test procedure, is it? ATP. Acceptance test procedure. There you go. That was a good memory, Simon. Well done. And July 2024. So December 2019 and July of 2024. So that was 5 years. Well, best part of 5 years. Ground testing of 2 flight thrusters was not conducted under hot fire conditions, as the statement implies, will be done. That testing is not listed as a constraint for the CFT in the same PCB report. So I'm not sure how it would have been captured in the form of documentation or work plans. Wow, that's so is that finger trouble? Is that someone having problems with Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Office, PowerPoint, not capturing things? I imagine at the time this was done, they won't have been mandated to use silly things like Microsoft Copilot and all that AI nonsense. Hopefully not. But anyway, that might be, a few years' time, I'm pretty sure that kind of AI nonsense will be contributors to accident investigation reports. Comment below what you think about the use of AI in safety-related applications, especially with simple office products. Let's have a look. So I'm not sure how it would have been captured in the form of documentation or work plan. So recommendation 13. Crew commercial programs, sensor sample rates, and data retention. So that recommendation directly relates to the feedback path from the control process, the spacecraft mission, the test vehicle, and the ground test organization, flight test organization. Disposition that ground testing and analysis demonstrate no improvement beyond format 12 in combustion chamber pressure sample rate is necessary for SL1 in preparation for crude SL2. I can't remember what SL means. What's SL dash mean, everybody? Come on, that must be explained somewhere, surely. No, it's not. So I'm presuming it's a proper flight, future flights in the program. Right. No improvement in the sample rate is necessary for SL1 in preparation for crude SL2. A brief on the rationale for not increasing sample rate should be held to align stakeholders. Additionally, evaluate what are the sensor data and sample rate should be captured on SL1 to support SL2 for both propulsion and other systems, e.g. record commanded pulse width, NTO, nitrogen tetroxide inlet pressure at higher rates to understand dynamics, DFI on few select thrusters of interest, higher rate IMU data for parachute events. So IMU's initial monitoring unit, DFI, don't know what that is. Let's have a look. DFI, is it in the acronym list? No, it's not. Fantastic. Just what we wanted. DFI, right, if I put a bracket around the front of it, maybe I can trick it to tell me what it means. No, it's not specified. Absolutely fantastic. I love it when that happens. If you can tell me what it is in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. DFI, is it flight instrumentation, maybe, on few select thrusters of interest? I don't know. Blankety blank. Yeah, this recommendation seems to imply that they don't want to change the sample rate or the way it's collected. So there's a rationale for not increasing it. But is that right? Based on what I've been saying today, do you think that rationale would still hold up, whatever it is? Because I don't know, my confidence in the engineering and design of this is a lot lower than it was when I started this session today. I mean, it was really high at the beginning, and it's just got progressively less and less and less the more I learn. No disrespect to anybody, but it's not giving me a warm feeling. Okay, let's keep going. So, data from unexpected issues must be available. Higher recording rates that do not cover the nominal mission burns can thus not investigate nominal mission burns or the health of thrusters during those burns. Fantastic. I'm really pleased you've said that. The integrated doghouse testing and single engine development qualification testing occurring in 2025 is extremely helpful in returning Starliner to crewed flight, but ground tests will have limitations. SL1 is an excellent opportunity to gather data to fill ground test gaps. Prudence dictates a thorough review of the opportunities to improve sensor data on SL1 or even to add data collection opportunities on SL1 to inform SL2. Perhaps include instrumenting NTO pressure at high rates on select thrusters, high rate on DFI systems used on OFT1, and or record command thruster pulse width for later download. I think this is all, if you think about it through the lens of a control loop, how do you, from the basic fundamentals, how do you know that this controller and the control path and the control process is behaving properly? You need some kind of sensors. Let's get a little box. Let's have a little box. There we go. Let's call this a sensor. In fact, no. Let's do an S. There we go. Like that. That'll do, won't it? Let's give it a nice. Let's give it a nice orange color with a nice orange border. There we go. So let's make it a bit smaller because that's too big. There we go. Make it a bit smaller. There we go. Fantastic. So if you want to understand how this control loop is working, you need sensors that are related to the controller. So whether it's too hot, too cold, whether it's got the right electrical power and all, whether it's been exposed to radiation, all that other good stuff. You probably want to know something about the control algorithm and the decisions that it's making. You're probably going to want to know about what beliefs it has, because if it believes that the sensory data it's getting is adequate and it's providing unsafe control actions, we need to know that. We need to know what feedback it's receiving. We need to know what interactions are happening. Are there any other controllers that are providing information or data, maybe from the ground? Are there any inputs from the ground that we also need to detect? So we put a sensor up there. What inputs does the controller have? And then, of course, what are the outputs from the controller? What control actions is it actually trying to command? And then, of course, we need some kind of feedback about how those control actions are actually manifested. So if you provide a control act, if you say, what example can I give? Stop watching that YouTube video. It's not appropriate for younger generations. Turn it off. That might be a control action, but does the person receiving that actually, listen and take action? Do they turn it off when they're asked? So you need sensory feedback on that bit, and then of course you might need sensory feedback about the control process itself. Did the control process even receive this command? Or did it receive a command that was never actually sent by the controller? Maybe there's something going on in this control path that's leading to the control process to behave as though it has received an unsafe control action, and so it's doing what it's doing, but actually the controller's not guilty. And then, of course, what is it about the control process itself we need to measure? So this was talking about the combustion chamber pressure, for example. And then, of course, what sensors do we have in that feedback path? Are there enough sensors of the right types providing feedback to the controller so that the controller can actually control its process appropriately? And then if you want to go really far, let's talk about the flight test organization, the ground, the ground team themselves. So, what feedback do they need? Do they need to know that they're able to receive feedback from the spacecraft? Is it at the right sample rate? Is it being received in the control center at the right time? Do they have that information available to them to make decisions? What decisions are they making based on that information? We've already said that for OFT1 and OFT2, they didn't have adequate feedback, so they were making potentially dangerous decisions for the crewed flight test. And of course, what control actions are they providing? And of course, how are those control actions provided to, in this case, the spacecraft? And I'm sure you could, it's not a big leap to think, well, hang on, well, if this is the engineering organization and this is the system safety engineers and the systems engineers making decisions about the architecture of the design of the system, then how are they communicating? What method are they using? Are they using a PowerPoint slide that doesn't contain the right amount of the correct information? Maybe the information was deleted or overlooked because Microsoft Office often crashes without saving your work. So I'm hoping you can see that this systematic examination of, well, what is the control loop? Who are we as the stakeholder in relation to this? What are our needs for sensory feedback? You're potentially specifying a lot of sensors there to be able to understand the safe behavior of these loops. And if you are under-specifying the number and types of sensors and the sensor data rate, the collection data rate and how it's communicated and whether it's recorded, whether it's crash survivable, all of that other good stuff, this can help you make those decisions. Okay, so let's now said all of that. Let's put this out of the way so it's not there. Let's put it down there a bit. There. That'll do, won't it? There we go. That'll do. Right. Where were we? So yeah, and/or record commanded thrust pulse widths for later download. Scope should be expanded beyond the propulsion system to other areas where risk and/or qualification gaps exist. Yes, I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think that's a fantastic recommendation because that's essentially what I've just said. I agree, that's fantastic. There we go. Okay, so let's just have a little bit of a break and a drink, I think. Let's see if there's anybody commenting. So we've got Steve. Hi, Steve. Great to see you again. Thank you for coming along. I appreciate your comments. Let's have a look. So With regard to your questioning the meaning of some of the document descriptions, perfect case where words have meaning, plus engineers can't write, plus not putting the general rule to avoid ambiguity to practice, results in not fully understanding what the author was trying to say. We need to encourage engineers to seek better written communication skills. Just a pet peeve I regularly encounter. Yes, me. I'm on the same. I'm not very good at speaking or writing, but I do understand how important it is. So I do try my best to do something good. And maybe AI authoring can help us a little bit, but we've got to be really, really careful with that. We should really develop those skills ourselves because it's important to be able to communicate clearly and communicate concepts in a language that makes sense for the audience. So yeah, thanks for that, Steve. Good to see you again. Let's just check and see if there's anybody on YouTube that is commenting and giving me an abuse. No, let's have a look at Facebook. No, it's all quiet on Facebook. Fantastic. There we go. Right, so let's have a drink. I'm getting a sore throat and a cough. So OCE, Engineering Development Data Standard. Generate an engineering data standard to define what data is necessary for model validation, vehicle system health, and performance characterization, analysis, and troubleshooting. I'm a little bit surprised by that because I kind of would have expected that would be part of standard practice for this kind of engineering organisation. So I'm a bit surprised. I'm not shocked, but I'm a bit surprised. But again, this is a standard. You know, if we were thinking about through the lens of a control structure and the beliefs and mental models of all the people involved, it'd be kind of good to have a standard about what engineering development data that they need as part of the project, the program, and that is centralized so everybody knows and understands and it can be coordinated. It's like a central model that everyone can refer to and has access to so they can see it directly, not through some kind of remote third party, software database that everyone has to log in and faff around with. Excuse me, I'm not naming names, particular software tools, but they seem to make engineering a lot harder than it needs to be, especially when it keeps logging out. Anyway, the industry lacks a standard or best practice document to define what engineering data is necessary for vehicle system health and performance characterization, analysis, and troubleshooting. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised by that. I would have thought this would be all sorted out, squared away. Okay, if it's not, fair enough. Fantastic recommendation. This is a recommendation I would make myself. NASA should generate a document to fill this gap and to levy as a requirement on future commercial partners. Yeah, this should be mandatory. You must do it this way. The same goes for interface control document and a master data reference list. If they don't already have one of those, that also must be mandated. NASA should generate a document to fill this gap. Yeah, fantastic. This should include recommendations or requirements defining what sample rates are necessary for what types of data, what ranges the sensors should operate within, and what metadata should be delivered, among other things. Yes, I completely agree with that. I'm a bit surprised they don't already have something like that. I would have thought that was one of the first things they'd do on day one. But anyway, let's keep going. So there must be a standard to evaluate if the data systems present will be sufficient. Without this standard, industry NASA will continue to have difficulty in evaluation of systems, especially for development programs. Yes, they will. It's very expensive not to have that. That would help solve a lot of headaches and make things generally a lot better. This is necessary critical for evaluation of immature systems. Simply, all standards ask for sufficient data, while there is no standard guide for the industry for what constitutes as sufficient. I think I mentioned this the other day. There is some European corporation safety standards, should I say, some active standards. I don't know if there is one for this particular topic. I don't know. I'm just aware these exist. If you're not familiar with them already, then I'd suggest having a look, searching for them. So this is, I'll stick it in the chat. There we go, ECSS.NL standards. So these are space standards. I'm not saying these are perfect or anything like. I'm not selling these. I'm just saying there are these things you might want to have a look at if you're not already aware. You're probably already aware, so if you are, just ignore me. Okay, right. Let's have a look. Organizational factor number 9: integrated propulsion standard. No integrated spacecraft propulsion system to evaluate the efficacy of the CFT propulsion system. I'm just thinking about it. So this is an organizational factor. It says there isn't an integrated system to do this. So is not the factor that they did something in a way that was not integrated and standardized, and what the effects are? And so the recommendation is they do that, not that it is missing in the first place, because there may be a reason for it not to be missing. Not to sort of, to play devil's advocate, there may be a reason why they don't have that. And it may be literally they haven't been resourced or had the time to do that. Maybe they would like to have done that, but they didn't have the resource or time to do that. So that explains why this issue exists. So recommendation 15, I better read this, haven't I? Test requirements were based on several documents. So test requirements, everybody, were based on several documents used widely in industry: SMCS 016, NASA Standard 5012, Standard 6001, SMCS 025. However, these requirement documents do not have sufficient details for spacecraft applications and require interpretation and agreement on the way individual requirements are met. Fantastic. That's what systems engineering is all about. In many cases, these documents require testing in all operating conditions. Determining and agreeing on what those conditions are is challenging and leads to disagreement and misunderstanding between teams. In addition, each of these disparate requirement documents that have been levied do not consider the overall system performance effects. They are focused on individual components, valve thrusters, etc., and not the integrated propulsion system. This is highlighted in the STAR report. I wonder if the use of STPA would help to sort that out. I think that would be worth having a look at, because then you could derive system-level requirements using STPA, interactions, feedback, all that other good stuff, and then marry that with these more specific requirements that require interpretation. I mean, that's potentially quite a lot of work, depending on how big these sets of requirements are. I mean, I don't know if it's anything like submarines. There's a lot of requirements. Okay, so recommendation number 15, integrated propulsion standard. Create a... there we go. Create a qualification standard for integrated spacecraft propulsion systems. This standard should consider interactions. Oh, that sounds like STPA stamp language, that does, between all propulsion system components. Yes, that's right. Here we go. And should focus on both individual component and system level integrated testing. That's fantastic. That's exactly what STPA does. In addition, teams should come to agreement prior to the start of any testing on what the testing should entail and what conditions and environments will be tested. Requirements are easy, but verifications are hard. Yes, they are, and so is validation. Coming to an early understanding on all testing and data required to verify compliance qualification to a requirement is critical to avoid late changes or misses in testing and analysis. Different teams will conclude that different testing and data will satisfy a requirement verification. Without agreement prior to testing, it is almost certain that NASA's expectations for requirements verification will differ from the testing and data provided by a partner, creating gaps in testing. Yes. I mean, this is, I like how they've written that, because of course that will happen. And then who pays for the gaps is the question. Oh, well, NASA is saying we want higher standards of verification requirements. And we as a commercial organization is saying, no, we don't need to do all of that. So NASA needs to pay more money. No. It should all be agreed a priori. It should be part of the contract. The contract should say that this is agreed appropriately and that any gaps will be covered by the commercial organization. Because again, I'd argue that NASA is probably not going to require all of these things for the sake of it. Yeah, I suppose you could argue, oh, well, they want a gold-plated solution. Well, I'm sure they're smart enough not to, think about it in those terms. So if they're making these, if they have these expectations, then they should be fulfilled because they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. I'd like to think they're not. I don't think they are. Give me some abuse in the chat if that's what we're talking about. Prior to the release of this report, a new standard prior to the release of this report, a new standard was submitted. Standard for the control of catastrophic hazards in human rate spacecraft propulsion. Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, we need to look at that. That sounds fantastic. So let's risk doing a Google, shall we, everybody? JSC-67723. Standard for the control of catastrophic something or other. And it's on the NASA standards website. Oh, look, some fantastic pictures. So this is... This was written in April 2025. Johnson Space Center. Upload publicly available standard. 1.82 megabytes. Ooh, fantastic. 189 pages. Wow. Wow, that's a beast. That's an absolute beast, that's really cool. Okay, so I'm not going to dig into this now, as maybe that's something I should look at as a bonus live stream in a little while. But just the first observation, right? If we're going to put documents out, and they're big documents, we need to make sure that the contractor or the recipient of those documents is empowered to be able to read them and take them on board. So I don't sort of expect we should just throw documents out the door and then expect everybody to read it. Not that I'm assuming they've expected that. I just mean that they are important documents that the people in the program need to review. The program itself needs to avail itself of that information and then consider how that information affects their program, their plans, their safety case, etc., requirements, all of that, architecture, all of that good stuff. But they need time to do that. And, me doing a live stream on this 311-page document is taking a while, and it's just me on my own, just reading through it and making sense of it. If we're talking about an organisation, a programme, taking on just one of those, that's potentially a lot of hours of effort and blood, sweat, toil and tear on behalf of a number of people. And then once they've read it and interpreted it, they've then got to make some changes or improvements in their processes, their design, their requirements, their actions and everything else. So there's quite a significant knock-on effect from this report being put out into the world. And so it should, there should be an action to do that. There should be resource available to do that. And there should be a statement that has actually been done and maybe a response to that report to the various key stakeholders. And maybe they're doing that. They're doing that. I've worked in a number of organisations where they're like, great, we ain't got time to do that, sorry. And it's like, well, if you did go through it, you might learn something. It might help you save a few million or tens of millions. But, we ain't got time for that. Let a graduate do it. Give it a graduate. Let them read it over a weekend, and then they can give us a PowerPoint at the next team meeting, and then we're just going to ignore it. Not that I've seen that happen, of course, many times. Anyway, let's keep going. So, fantastic. This new standard may adequately accomplish the associated action. However, this should be determined by SOMD. I can't remember what SOMD means. SOMD. Oh, there it is. The Space Operations Mission Directorate. Come on, Si, you should remember that. Put that over here. Pardon me. Space Operations Mission Directorate. There we go. Perform an evaluation prior to crewed flight. So that shall happen. So how is that mandated that they cannot go flying until this has been done? To determine the effectiveness of new integrated spacecraft propulsion system standard to prevent CFT propulsion failures. SOMD evaluate the effectiveness of the standard, determine gaps to the standard, if any, and determine gaps to meeting the standard, if any, of CFT Starliner 1 crew, SL. Is that Starliner 1, SL1? Crew Dragon and other crewed vehicles. I'd argue that the European Space Agency might also want to be aware of this document. So if you're all watching in the Netherlands and Germany and elsewhere, I'd suggest getting that document out and having a flick through it, because I think that might be helpful. Verify that the new propulsion standard removes any potential gaps, qualification issues, and address appropriately if not. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at the time. It's 18:18 local, and we've got to section 4.8.2 best practices. And we've still got probably, let's have a look, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 pages to go. I think my voice is getting ready to give out. So I think what we'll do is we'll call that an evening today. And we will pick up at section 4.82 best practices tomorrow. So same time tomorrow, 1700 BST, so UTC +1. Make sure to bring some refreshments, bring your friends, bring your family, come and watch, and ask me all the difficult, horrible questions you could possibly think of. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next live stream tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night.